Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on today's ComArtSci virtual talk. My name is Melissa Wagacy, and I'm the Associate Director of Development for MSU's College of Communication, Arts, and Sciences, a college devoted to storytelling and the way that we communicate and connect. 6 months ago, but who's counting? When most of the US went remote, we watched our alumni quickly adapt and pivot. We discovered an interest in behind the scenes aspects of different ComArtSci careers, which prompted this webinar series about media and communication careers pivoting in the pandemic, which leads us to today's 11th ComArtSci talks on nonprofits staying the course, with 3 alumni from highly impacted organizations who have been challenged to continue to serve their communities. A bit of housekeeping before we get started. Attendees will note that your microphone and video camera will be off. However, we encourage you to ask questions throughout the talk through the Q&A function, and we'll be sure to moderate that as we go along. Also, make sure that you tag us today with hashtag ComArtSci Talks. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator. Floyd Atkins is Associate Vice President for Advancement for Michigan State University. He came to MSU earlier this year and has made quite the impact in a short amount of time. Floyd has served in higher education for more than 30 years, with 25 years of experience in advancement. He has held numerous leadership roles in addition to fundraising positions at several large comprehensive universities, including University of Iowa Foundation, the Ohio State University Foundation, and University of Tennessee Foundation. His roles have focused on principal gifts, major gifts, public relations and marketing, multicultural affairs, and he has been involved in several billion-dollar campaigns. Floyd has been described as an advocate for higher education. He's passionate and enthusiastic leader who puts coaching and mentoring first. Floyd and his wife, Brenda, reside in Columbus, Ohio, and they have a son and a daughter. We're thrilled to have him today as our moderator. And with that, I'll turn it over to Floyd to introduce a few of our Spartan panelists.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Melissa. Let me first thank our panelists and guests for being here. This is truly a wonderful opportunity, and it is good to be at Michigan State University in this part of my life and career. First, let me take the opportunity to introduce to you Lisa Dan Sock, who holds a BA in advertising and MBA from MSU. She was named Chief Brand and Impact Officer for the Arizona Community Foundation in May 2017. Lisa came to ACF from the Community Foundation from Southeast Michigan, where she was Vice President for Marketing and Communication. As Vice President, Corporate Philanthropy, Marketing and Communications for Rock Ventures, Lisa created and implemented the Opportunity Detroit Market Campaign, oversaw Rock Ventures philanthropy program, and helped launch the Detroit Homecoming program with Cranes Communication, among other accomplishments. Lisa's background includes the creation and implementation of the award-winning Pure Michigan campaign for the state of Michigan as Senior Vice President, Marketing and Legislative Affairs at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. Prior to that, she served as a managing partner of D&D Advisors and held senior level positions at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. Lisa's civic leadership has included service on the boards of Delta Dental of Michigan, Renaissance Health Services, the Michigan State University's Eli Broad Alumni Board, and she's on the Knight Foundation's Detroit Advisory Committee. Robin Rosenthal is a communications officer for the W.K. Kellogg Foundation in Battle Creek. Rosenthal works closely with colleagues and grantees to increase awareness and support for the foundation's vision through a comprehensive strategic communications program. In this capacity, she uses a wide range of communications tools to help deliver priority messages to the foundation's external audiences. Before joining the foundation in 2013, she worked as a reporter and desk editor for Flint Journal in Flint, Michigan, and its parent company, Booth Newspapers. She has experience in nonprofit sector, writing for Fitzer Institute in Kalamazoo and the C.S. Mott Foundation in Flint. She also previously served as a communications specialist for the American Cancer Society in Flint as well. Rosenthal holds a bachelor's degree in journalism from MSU, where her coursework included an emphasis on women's studies and political science, and she is currently pursuing her master's degree in strategic and digital communications from MSU. Rosenthal has received awards for investigative and feature writing from the Michigan Press Association and the Michigan Associated Press Editorial Association. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Melissa, who will introduce Ann Ginn for us.
Thank you, Floyd. This afternoon, we're very fortunate to have Ann Ginn with us. We were planning on Kirk Mays. Kirk got called away. However, Forgotten Harvest has many wonderful Spartans. And Ann Ginn is the Chief Public Policy Officer for Forgotten Harvest. And Ann holds an MSU Executive MBA, which she received in 1997. So thank you for being with us, Ann. And Floyd, I'll let you take it from here.
Well, how about this? How about we start with Ann and ask that question? So, Ann, talk to us about. So, how do you define what is the new normal right now? We're all in it together, and we're all experiencing some very interesting things. I describe it as being in an episode of The Twilight Zone while watching Groundhog's Day. But how would you describe what's taking place now?
Oh, it's a great question. We're a food rescue. We typically, which is somewhat different in food operation from a food bank. A food bank purchases food and distributes it then and assesses its partner agencies who distribute that food a small fee called a maintenance fee. A food rescue, which we do, we rescue donated food, and probably immediately that brings to mind fuzzy strawberries in the refrigerator or leftovers or something. We rescue roughly 46 million pounds of food a year. A meal is roughly 1 pound, 1.2 pounds, so that's a really big pile. We rescue food from farmers, wholesalers, distributors, retailers, grocers, some restaurants, some prepared food, high entertainment venues, and then distribute it typically via about 250 partner agencies in the Metro Detroit area. To answer your question, Floyd, things changed fast. When COVID hit, we lost about 65% of our agencies within 2 weeks. Most people who run agencies are not paid staff. They're volunteers, and in many cases, they're seniors. And clearly, they chose to stay home. As our governor here in Michigan urged, we lost about 35% of our grocery rescue food because people understandably were very rapidly not hoarding food, but buying food in large quantities. And so the food supply chain, start to finish, was disrupted, both because restaurants and entertainment venues closed. And so they had surplus food, but not necessarily what a family would want. And that food wasn't quickly accessible to us. And the food that was coming into groceries through the normal supply chain changed very rapidly. In addition, we have a staff of about 80 people, full-time and part-time people. We typically have between 14,000 and 15,000 volunteers a year who help us repack the food that we rescue from manufacturers, from processors, and from wholesalers and distributors. We get it in huge bulk quantities, and then we break it down into family household quantities. But volunteers dried up immediately.
Mm.
So we went from having hundreds of volunteers a week to no volunteers whatsoever. In addition, in order to meet social distancing requirements, we're already very constrained in our current warehouse. We're in the middle of a capital campaign right now for a new campus. We knew that we needed to expand, and so we rapidly had to acquire warehouse space so that our staff could spread out and operate safely. We initially moved to the TCF Center at the gracious support of the city of Detroit. That quickly became a field hospital for COVID positive people. Even though it's a very large venue, we felt having our facility even at the opposite end of the building was not wise. So we quickly had to acquire another warehouse site, which we're now using. So I would say very rapidly, all of the elements in our operation changed. In addition, our food distribution needed to change because we needed to assure that we could staff pantries with our very small staff and have no contact with people who needed food at a time when the demand for emergency food just exploded.
Right.
Um,
Well, let me
so
ask, no, go ahead.
today we're finding a new normal, and we're not quite there yet.
Yeah. Well, let me turn that same question over to you, Robin. What kinds of things are you seeing at WK Kellogg?
I think the biggest change, of course, like everyone else, we quickly went from being in offices and being in our communities to working from home. But I think in this time, we've really tried to step up and serve the gap, the need in our communities. So we were all in a rhythm of work, but that was disrupted. And so instead, we had to say to our communities, what do you need in this time of COVID, right? And then with the civil unrest, again, what do you need from us? And so we've really been trying to focus on better serving our communities. And that looks a lot of different ways. So it means us being agile with the grants that we give. We've done a lot. We've done millions of dollars of COVID specific grants. And it's also, back in June, we also announced additional dollars and additional payout, knowing that our nonprofits are very fragile right now, but the need for them is greater than ever. And so the capacity of them in serving the community is so important. And so we've really just tried to step up to the plate and putting additional resources to our grantees and being agile with what they need when they need it.
Thank you. Lisa, I'm going to ask you the same question and add on to something that Robin started to get into, which was the social unrest. So if you could talk about the new norm, but also connect that, with the, how do you see the social and racial equity issues that are being highlighted right now in our country? And you're in Arizona, and we're all in different places right now. So if you could talk a little bit about, not only the new norm, but what is taking place in terms of the racial inequities and social justice issues as well.
Great question, and certainly something we've been very, very focused on here at the Arizona Community Foundation. First, let me start by saying how we had to pivot in March is that would be the end of our fiscal year. We literally had to go remote, handle all of the new donors that wanted to give to the COVID out of their own donor advised funds, did a fundraising campaign where we raised over $10 million specifically for COVID, and then created COVID funds through 7 different geographic areas because we're a statewide community foundation. And in retrospect, what we did not take the time to do because we were working so fast on immediate relief was understanding the demographics of both the leadership of the nonprofits that we were supporting, as well as the demographics of the population that they were serving. So we had to pivot very quickly in that we wanted to make it easy for the 921 nonprofits that needed the support and the financial resources. So we just literally made it a very simple application process, but we didn't collect that data about how many of them were Black-led organizations or Navajo-led or Asian-led, so that we would have, I would say, the detailed information that we needed to be able to respond to what the community was asking us for. We have since gone out and done a survey, but now our work is really focused on how do we bring healing to the community. How do we educate the community? We just held 4 series webinars for Black History Month, where we focused on what's been the historical lead up to where we find ourselves, where are the inequities, and then we launched a social justice fund, which we're happy to announce is already just about over $1 million, where we're going to focus on working on the financial integrity of businesses and Black-led businesses so that we can support them as they grow through this pandemic, but also beyond. So we've had to pivot quite a bit.
Sure. And one of the things that we're noticing in our work and philanthropy here at MSU is that change that corporations and foundations are making as funds are being adjusted to address some of the racial and social justice needs. Robin, are you seeing that as well at WK Kellogg?
Yeah, so for those that aren't familiar with the Kellogg Foundation, racial equity undergirds all of our work. So even before March, anytime we're making a grant, we are looking at, is it serving the most vulnerable, which typically are communities of color and low-income communities. We're looking at the board, to Lisa's point, we're looking at the board makeup and the staff makeup, and not just whether or not their staff is diverse, but is their leadership, their management, their board governed by diverse folks as well. And so I think there's been an awakening among philanthropy since March of the disparities that COVID has kind of unearthed. And then the civil unrest, of course, has helped showcase that as well. That is our space. And so it's really great to see more interest. I hope it's a long-term strategic play. I really hope that other funders see the need and the opportunity in investing in communities of color. I would especially call out the South, right, where there is not a lot of investment in the South, right, in our Navajo nations, in the communities of Mississippi and New Orleans, which are really important to the Kellogg Foundation. And so it's really great to see this. This is more of a national discourse. And I hope it's not just a fad, right? I really hope that this is something that businesses, philanthropy, government, private, public, everybody is looking at those through this racial equity lens, because it's so critical.
Right. And what are you seeing in your world?
From a development perspective or a fundraising perspective?
Correct.
Or
and just overall in your organization, what are you seeing in terms of the social and racial equity issues in what's playing out right now throughout the country?
Interesting question. We know that the data shows that racial inequity is a primary factor in food insecurity. So if one looks at our mission is to feed people facing need today, but we also feel very strongly about looking at why there is need and addressing that need in the future so that hopefully people are able to return to or find sustainable living. As an organization, we are a very diverse organization. We're small, and I would say that our knowledge of the community and our ability to work within the community is positive due to the fact that we have as a priority hiring staff that represent the breadth of our community. And I would say that, I would guess that's probably true. I know my peers in many of the food banks across the country are far less involved with the operations organizations or the development organizations, but I would guess the observations that we have about Forgotten Harvest are probably true for other major emergency food providers across the country.
Can either one of you talk about how your company or companies and foundations have gone about handling crisis communication during this time period, and what that's been like, and what have been the pitfalls of it, and the highlights of it, et cetera? Robin, I see you shaking your head. You want to take that?
I'll start. I think one thing we've done exceedingly well is the internal communications. There's that saying, you can't go external till you go internal.
Right.
And, we've seen, without being political, we've seen when there isn't communication, what happens. And what we've done really well is that at a time where there could be a lot of disconnection between staff and leadership, and there's a time where there could be a lot of chaos and concern and confusion, our leadership since March has held bi-weekly staff meetings for just 45 minutes. We call them town halls. And that has allowed us to hear directly from our CEO and our leadership on what our vision is, what we're doing, how we're to respond, to ask questions directly of her, and our leaders. And I think that's been so important because it's really provided us the clarity we need to do our work well. It's provided the calmness, and it's also provided the concern. So remember, all of us, you know, Ann, Lisa, and myself, the stuff we do every day is heavy on a regular day, right? And it's heavy in your heart. And then we're also experiencing COVID, and we're also experiencing this racial unrest. So there's really no break from it ever in our job, right? It's from the time you get up in the morning to the time you go to bed. It's your work, it's your life now. And so just even communicating around the concern around staff has just been a gift. So that internal touch point to keep us calm, to keep us cared for, to give us clarity so we can serve our communities has been really spectacular. And I just don't think we should forget about the internal component before you go external.
Robin, I'm glad you addressed that. Actually, when I first started here at MSU, my first all staff meeting took place on June 1st, which was the week right after George Floyd had been murdered. And it was interesting because we were in the process. You can feel that so many folks were grieving during that process, during that time period, and it was just a time for us to be able to come together as an organization. And so I'm really glad that you talked about that a little bit. Lisa, what are you hearing? You know, as a community foundation, what are you hearing from some of the donors in your space? What are they saying? What are some of the things that they're interested in right now during this time period?
You know, it's interesting, moving to Arizona, where in essence, most of the people that live here come from somewhere else, so they don't have the same loyalty as I had as a Detroiter or as a Michigan State gal. But what we're finding is because of this pandemic and the crisis and everything going on with racial injustice, we have a lot more donors who are now asking, who should we support? How should we support them? And so we've been working very diligently to put together a listing of all of the grassroots nonprofits that are Black led, that are either working on justice, education, economic equality. And we're providing those lists routinely. We've posted it on our website. We've taken, you know, and done webinars for our donors who have asked, who are the people that really need us right now? I mean, if you think about a lot of wealthy people who have donor advised funds, they write a check and they have their standard 4 or 5 charities that they support every year. I mean, they stepped up and gave 100% more through their donor advised funds, almost $2.5 million more in the first quarter. And it was all directed to, like Ann said, to food insecurity, to getting the PPE equipment to the Navajo Nation, where there's only one health center, to making sure that the food was getting delivered. And they really, from my perspective, stepped outside of their normal giving patterns to focus on what the community needed most right now. And it's really been very impressive to see. And we don't see it slowing down. They're still continuing to support those organizations as well.
So it's interesting, and one of the things that's coming to my mind now, in that same kind of space is, you know, what kind of discussions, and any of you can take this, what kind of discussions are within various organizations are you having about how to keep people safe, employees, clients, customers? You know, is there a protocol that's been put into place in case of any kind of crazy outbreak? I mean, I know, Lisa, you're in an environment where there's a very contentious, senatorial race that's going on. And of course, here in Michigan, you know, we see a lot of different strains of outbreaks of protesting, et cetera, even at our Capitol. Talk about that a little bit, if any of you can.
I'll start. We take very, very seriously the safety of both our employees and our donors. Obviously, many of our donors are elderly and are at a higher risk. It's funny you should mention this. I just did the protocol communications because we're coming into year end where donors would normally come in and talk to us about their year-end giving, we are not encouraging them to come here, but if they want to, they need to understand it's going to be a very different experience. We will put them in a conference room. They will be expected to wear masks. We have sanitizing stations throughout the office, and there's nobody in the office right now except for a finance person who's cutting checks and the receptionist who's answering phone calls. But some of the executives come in and out depending upon, you know, what we need to do from a business perspective. So the position that my boss, the CEO, and the executive team has taken is we will not ask our staff to come back before we know it's safe for them to come back. So we're talking into next year. And in that vein, we will still do a staggered back to work policy where people will be able to safely distance. We're doing all of the signs, all of how do you keep yourself safe. But we're really mindful of making sure our donors understand that it's not a good time for them to be out in public because of their risks.
Right. And what are you seeing? How are you operating?
We changed our model, our food rescue and distribution model very rapidly. We were talking about it in February, late February, last week in February, and then within the third week of March, we were already making major changes for our staff because we are considered emergency response. And we are frontline working with communities, and in many cases, communities that have been hit very hard. We immediately secured PPE, medical quality masks, face shields, gloves. We did not get gowns, but assure that everybody who is a frontline person has the proper attire. We have hand cleaning stations at all of our pantries. Within our organization, we set up a very comprehensive plan for sanitation, and people have been wonderful about adhering to it. As changes occur, we find that people get tired of this and they'd like to be back to the old normal. And our CEO is wonderful about reminding people this is about protecting each other and our families. We refer to our organization as a team, and that also assuring that the people we serve and that the people who support us, our partner agencies, our financial donors, our food donors, and the organizations with whom we collaborate also are always safe. So it's a very high priority. Maintaining the safety of our team and all of our contacts is a very high priority. Many of our organization works from home if people can.
So let me ask this question, and this may sound odd in a way, but and once I explain it, I think you'll get it. One of the things that we have discovered using Zoom, which I know that we can all admit can be very exhausting at times, let's just be real. But one of the things that we've discovered is, we have a very large organization here. And in some of the conversations that we have with our staff, we just recently went a DEI training session. And what we discovered is that we would break people up in small groups of maybe 5 or 6 people. And people who wouldn't ordinarily talk, they started to speak and they started to share their feelings and thoughts. And we realized that, and some of those folks admitted that if they were in a large group, if we were all in person, they probably would not have shared some of their, personal information, and they would not have been vulnerable. So as I say that, what kinds of changes have you seen in your organizations in terms of how you're operating? We are in this. Remember, at the very beginning of this, we were all having the happy hours, right? And we were getting together and trying to stay connected. So, what kinds of things are you seeing that has been changing for the better? And maybe you can talk about some of the bad as well, but maybe some of the things that have really turned out well in this situation that we're in right now. Robin, you want to take that one to start with?
Yeah, I don't mean to be the naysayer, so I'll start with the bad, right? Because I feel like, our organization is highly relational, both internally with one another and then also with our communities. So before COVID, myself and many others who are serving our communities are on the road all the time in our communities. So here I am based in Michigan, but I serve Mississippi and New Orleans. And so I was down there often with our team that is based there and with our community and our partners who are there, which is so important to build trust, right? To build to understand the context of the work and to understand the issues and the challenges, and just to build a relationship with our partners, both internally and externally. So for me, it's been hard to be on Zoom a little bit because it's harder you have to be more intentional. Like we meet as a team every day on Zoom. And there's some great things, like you get to see people's pets and you get to see another side of folks, right? And we are trying to be more intentional about our personal relationships, but we've always been like that. Like we know each other really, really well. We're just a highly relational group. So we get to see each other a little bit different, you in ponytails or pigtails or pajama bottoms. But it's hard not being with each other because that's just
Sure.
how we were before.
Right, right. How about you, Lisa?
Yeah, I would say I'm going to stick to the positive. The positive for me has been, and Robin actually referred to it, we've become much better at our communications with each other. I don't know if being together in the building together gave us an excuse to not communicate, but now you're forced to communicate. And I will give you the example of one of the things that we've taken on has been the small business relief grants for Maricopa County, the city of Phoenix, and I think 5 of our smaller cities. So we're literally pivoting from giving out grants to nonprofits at a clip of about, 200 or 300 a month to now giving out thousands of small business grants to businesses that are in desperate need of them. So we could not do that in a remote environment unless we were clearly communicating. And as Robin said, from the CEO to the executive team, to the grants team, to the brand and impact team, we have to know when to get it up on the website, how to get that app live, how to communicate to the media that it's open, and literally get $100 million out the door to small businesses through the CARES Act, working together with the municipality. So I would say we've never been better at our internal communications, and the media has been phenomenal in terms of supporting us through this crisis, both when we were fundraising for the COVID fund, but now as we're trying to reach out and get the desperately needed money to the small businesses. So I feel, I only hope that when we do all get through this, we don't lose those connections and that common cause of working together, because it's been much stronger as a result.
Sure. I want to throw another question out, and Lisa, this may be more for you and Ann, and Robin, you may have some thoughts on this as well, and that's about, advertising. Has that changed at all during this time period?
Well, I'll start just because we did honestly get 4 different media outlets that gave us free space and free time to talk about give to the COVID fund so that we can support the community. And in turn, we've now bought some advertising to tell the story of the nonprofits and the small businesses that have granted. So I almost say that we're working together, but the advertising has become much more digital for us than we've used in the past. So I would say we've looked at different ways of reaching our audiences in multiple ways, but it has been a shift.
Yeah, yeah. Ann, you want to come in?
Sure, I would say for us the same. Because it's an election year, our paid advertising plan keeps us out of print and out of traditional broadcast advertising until after the primary during the summer, and we're not doing any right now. However, we did have much earned media. There was tremendous interest in what we were doing and how we were doing it. And you all have probably seen pictures either in the national media or local media of hundreds and hundreds of cars in multiple columns lined up.
Right.
Profound images, and the media was very interested in both what we were doing and what the local food bank Gleaners was doing and how were we meeting the need. And so we got a lot of coverage. We had to shift our fundraisers, which typically were in person and fun and events, to electronic online fundraisers. And so that required changes in our communications and our strategy and what we did as well. So I would say we somewhat shifted our communications plan to social, to web-based communications, offset with paid advertising at the right time.
And let me ask you something. How do you handle, so when you see those long lines, I mean, I know how it impacts me when I'm watching it on the news. How do you and your team members handle that from an emotional standpoint?
It's a good question. It's hard. Because of my age, Kirk made me promise that I would not be frontline at a pantry, even though pretty much everybody else in our organization spent time. So I was behind the scenes in helping to identify sites. We did two things. Typically, we run 6 days a week. And for the first 3 to 5 weeks of COVID, we'll say March through into early April, some of us were working 7 days a week. And frankly, we were emotionally just exhausted. Both people in the warehouses, drivers, and those of us who have primarily office jobs. So we shifted to a 5-day-a-week calendar, and we also added some paid holidays. The federal government didn't celebrate them, but we gave people 3 days off, some long weekends, just so people could step away. And I would say, to comments that Robin, you and Lisa, you have made, we're a very close community at Forgotten Harvest, and so I would say we all supported each other. I think there have been days where probably every one of us has been near tears or in tears. Doesn't matter age, background, gender. We crossed all lines. That it's just, it's very hard. But I would say we've supported each other, and we worked really hard to assure that people stay safe and know it's a priority, and that we reassure people your family is a high priority. Give time to work and leave it at work.
That's wonderful. Before I ask this next question, which is going to hopefully put a smile on everyone's face, I want to encourage all of you who are listening in to, put, if you have some questions that you would like to have answers to, please put them in the question and answer feature of our program. Just go ahead and type it in, and I'll recognize you, or I'll recognize you by reciting your question. But let's start with Robin with this question. Tell us, how has your MSU degree prepared you for everything that you're doing right now?
Oh my gosh, in so many spectacular ways. Oh gosh. I mean, I think number one, gave me diverse experiences to get into the real world, right? We all come from our own little bubble.
Right.
Then we came to Michigan State, and all of a sudden we're in this really big bubble. And I think that's so important. It stretched me in really uncomfortable ways, which is so important. Like, I remember seeing Maya Angelou at the LaWharton Center there, right? And just being in tears, seeing Bill Clinton, when he was running for office, and having exposure to all kinds of people and life experiences. And I think that's the most important thing, because when you get into the real world, it allows you to be uncomfortable with the uncomfortable, right? And challenge yourself and find diverse experiences, right? So I think that's probably the most important thing. It also obviously gave me the skill set and the network. It also gave me something to be really proud about, right? So I came from a really impoverished background where I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. And so for me, it was the first place I felt like I belonged. And I've carried that with me. I go to games, not this year. You know, I'll have 2 degrees. My husband has 2 degrees from the university. My oldest daughter is at the institution. So, I mean, it's just a point of pride. And I'm so incredibly grateful for the journey I had there and continue to have there.
Oh, thank you, Robin. Lisa, let's go over to you. Same question.
Yes, and I echo everything Robin said. I will tell you what MSU and the undergrad program that I went through taught me was how to communicate and how to adapt quickly. And I think if you look at everything that we've been able to do to respond to this pandemic, we learned from our teachers, our professors, our network of people. I was on 2 calls today and I mentioned that I was going to be doing this webinar, and one said, "Oh, my boss is from MSU." And it is a passion that we carry with us because of what our school did for us. It's not what we did for them, but what they did for us. They not only helped me grow up, but they taught me that the world is both positive and negative, and you have to be able to respond to all circumstances. We're in a very difficult time for this country, both because of the pandemic, because we're in election year, and there's social unrest. This is unlike anything we've lived through. We want to make sure that the students coming up next have the hope that what you're learning from a foundation perspective right now at MSU is going to help you carry through these times. And that is what all of us on this call can say with certainty and confidence. It's what you all did for us.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Anne?
I guess my experience was a little different. I was a little older when I was during my 2 years in the MSU Executive MBA program. What was so valuable to me was the commitment that we had to the faculty and that the faculty had to us. We weren't on campus, we were in Troy, so regardless of the weather, regardless of family affairs, faculty made the journey 2 times a week to meet with us for 4 hours. In addition, we were assigned to teams, and in the 90s, the 80s and the 90s, there was a lot of conversation about teamwork in a corporate world. I'm a GM retiree and was a GM at that time. And there was a lot of talk about teamwork, and there was a part of me that I would say was a little skeptical. Yeah, really, this will be fine. I'll do it. It'll be just fine. It was tremendous. We were very different. Each team was assigned. We didn't pick each other. And we were tremendously dedicated to each other in personality and professional background. And I've said to folks here, as we've done some of the things we've done over the last 6 months, the teamwork that I experienced in the MSU Executive MBA program was probably the best teamwork I have ever experienced anywhere. And I would hope everybody who's participating on the call today has that same opportunity through their MSU experience. It was something to learn from and something to model and replicate in other places. And the academic background was wonderful, but I would say the fact that we all worked together was critical and was so important.
The 3 of you are just walking fundraisers for the entire organization, and spokeswomen. I really appreciate hearing those stories. We have a question from one of my colleagues, Lois Furry, who wants to know, one of the most effective communications vehicles for older generations remains print and direct mail. For those of you doing fundraising, you mentioned shifting to digital. Did you also cut back on print? And if so, are you worried about how that might affect giving?
I'm going to take this one first, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I shifted to an annual report that is digital for the first time. This is my 4th annual report that I've produced for the Community Foundation here in Arizona. And I am really nervous about it because 6,000 of our donors usually tell us how much they love our publication every year. I know, I'm very proud of it. But one of the feedbacks that we got from our most recent donor survey, which was done prior to COVID hitting in March, was that donors wanted to hear more about our goals. They wanted to hear more. They wanted to see more than just the annual report. So we are going to institute a paper direct mail newsletter that goes out 4 times a year. I get mine from MSU. I read it religiously every time I get it. So while we had to cut back on our annual report this year because of costs, I do anticipate going back to a paper copy, particularly for the audience that we serve. Let me just give you the pros and cons. The digital copy that we sent out went to 12,000 people. The paper copy I mailed out went to 6,000 people. So let's hope. I got a 26% open rate my first day. So I'm monitoring those statistics, and we are going to pivot based on what we learn from this first experience.
Now, for those of you who don't, 26% is actually pretty good.
First day.
First day, that's pretty good.
12,000.
Yes, absolutely. Robin, any thoughts on this?
No, we don't do a whole lot of advertising. So that's
Right.
we do digital, right? And it's about
Right.
promoting the work that we're doing with our partners.
And Anne, how about you?
I shouldn't speak for my peer who's head of development and marketing. But our donor base tends to skew older. So Lisa, we have the same concerns. We are slowly migrating. What we're doing is expanding. We're continuing to use print and traditional media, but we are expanding to try and to identify, recruit, and retain younger donors using younger donors' preferred media. Part of what we've done is intellectually say that's what we have to do, but we also, my observation is, we have also aggressively recruited more staff. As we bring staff on, there's staff who are more accustomed to communicating using newer communications tools, and I think that's been very, very effective and very helpful.
Good. Well, believe it or not, we're coming close to our hour. I want to give each of you the time if you have any final statement that you would like to make, and then I'm going to turn it back over to my colleague Melissa to close us out. But you know, I just want to say that Lisa Ann and Robin, this has been an absolute pleasure. Really appreciate you, you know, taking the time out of your schedule to visit with us and the many alumni who are on this call today. It's a joy when folks take their time to share their experiences, and particularly during this time period that we're in right now. It's just something that is so important for us to share our stories. So we really appreciate it. So if you have any closing statements that you would like to share, I'd be happy to hear it.
Can I just riff off of something Anne mentioned earlier?
Sure, absolutely.
We talked about kind of caring for staff, right, during this time. And I just really want to underscore that point, because we all come to work every day with different experiences, and you can never make assumptions about people's experiences that day or that week or that month. And you know, a colleague of mine said it best, because we've tried to do a lot of healing with our team. You know, after Breonna Taylor, we all kind of just got together and on a Zoom call and tried to have a healing moment, actually a 2-hour healing moment. But she said, you know, she feels like she comes to work some days with a mask on, right? You have to like put your smile on and pretend that everything's okay. And we all work in sectors that is, it's just, our work is really heavy, and then life is really heavy. And so for folks that are listening, you know, just, you never know what people are coming in. You know, it doesn't matter if you are working at Meijer, or you're working, you know, at a major advertising company, or working at General Motors. people come to work with life, right? And right now, you just don't know how people are experiencing this life. And so just caring for one another and checking in on one another and giving folks grace and giving them that moment and allowing them to take off their mask, I just think is really important as we see each other in this time. It could be a really, that could be the silver lining, right? Where we actually are able to see one another for who we are.
Robin, that's not only beautiful. Lisa, you wanted to add to that?
I just want to say, Gina, in response to your question about Detroit, because it is still in my heart, and I'm choking up because some of the people that I've lost in Detroit that I work very, very closely with, anything you can do to help Detroiters stay safe, keep those businesses going. A lot of progress was made in that city. It was really coming back. Keep your heart there, because all Detroiters need and require a lot of support in helping. So just like Robin said, we're doing the same with our employees, but I need you to take over for me because I'm not there in Detroit helping them. So I need you to do that for me.
That's beautiful. I don't know what else to say, and sometime, you know, you just get to the point where you just have to say, just simply thank you, because your remarks, those final remarks in particular, it means a lot, and it means a lot to me as a leader in our organization, because I feel that it's really important for us to take care of each other. We should be doing it all the time, but particularly during this time. And so once again, I want to thank you, Robin and Lisa and Ann, for sharing your thoughts, your experience with us, your joys with us. And I look forward to meeting you all in person one day real soon. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Floyd, for being a fantastic moderator. And thank you so much to our fantastic Spartan panelists, as well as for our audience for tuning in today. We really appreciate you joining us, and for that way we can talk to you about future talks as well. Our next talk we're planning on for November, and we're planning on pivots made in politics. So please watch your inbox for a follow-up email for a survey, as well as the invitation for future talks. So thank you again, and go green.
Go
Go
White.
White.